Hello guys and welcome back to another video. My name is Kizzy and today we're going to talk about some books. So today I'm going to be doing my January, February, March, April, May, June, October. I'm going to be doing my October wrap up, which the books are currently getting some love from little Leo over there. If I just show you the little gremlin. Thanks, Leo. Yeah, that's about sums up my life. I make things and then Leo destroys them. But, you know, what can you do? I read quite a few of these as audiobooks and a few of these as, like, I physically read them. I do actually have them all in physical form because the things that I did read as audiobooks, I had to study them for classes at school, at uni. Sorry, people get annoyed if I call it school because, like, I don't know. So most of these books, in fact all of these books except one, I did read for university for my two classes. One is a creative writing module and the other is science fiction and fantasy, specifically British science fiction and fantasy, all from before, I think like the latest is like the 1970s time, so from before then. So yes, I will mention if I read them through audiobook and all that jazz when I get to the book. Sorry if Leo's too noisy. But the first book I have is Kenneth Grahame's The Wind in the Willows. This is obviously a kid's book and I really enjoyed it. It reminded me, I didn't read it as a kid. All these books I've never read before, even though a lot of them are children's fantasy. But I really enjoyed this. So I had never read it and it just reminded me of reading like Beatrix Potter, or what was it, you know, the book with the little mice? I'll put like pictures of it because I used to love that. Bramley Hedge. So yes, and it just reminded me of reading that and I really loved it. I can't wait to read it. If I have kids, it'll be great because it's really cute. So for those that don't know, this follows a bunch of animals who are basically just middle class people in the disguise of animals. Particularly we follow Mole and his kind of friend who is the water rat, and their friend the toad, who I feel like he's like the renowned character. But this edition is gorgeous. It's like the V&A edition. It's like a hardback. They have them in like multiple books. So they have Anna Green Gables, Little Women, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and The Secret Garden as well. This is the only one I've got of this, but it has little small, very small illustrations throughout it at the start of the chapters and stuff, which are very cute. So it was lovely. Bloody hell. The next book I've got, this isn't in order, but you know, there we go, is The Vegetarian by Han Kang. I read this for my creative writing module. The way it works is we write a book and we write a creative response in the form that it was, so like in prose or poetry, etc. And I read this at the start of last month and it was very weird. It was very weird. So it is actually a kind of interpretation, retelling, reimagining more of the, is it Apollo and Daphne from Metamorphosis, Ovid's Metamorphosis, where Daphne is chased by Apollo and to escape being raped by him, she changes herself into a tree. That is kind of this, but it's taken in a much more kind of modern, well, I actually don't know when this was published, in 2007. So it's about 10 years old now. But it has 3 parts to it that follows 3 different characters who surround this one woman who kind of goes through a crisis of some sort or it's seen as a crisis, where she stops eating and she becomes a vegetarian, but extremely strict, where she basically just stops eating. And then she ends up being sanctioned, or there's a lot of discussions on mental health and like the reception of it and everything. And the one thing that I really did want, but I think it was kind of purposeful of the story, was to get the woman's point of view, whereas we never get that. We get her husband's, which is what it starts off with, then her brother-in-law, and then her sister. And yeah, it was a weird book. I still kind of don't know how to process it. Lots of people in my class loved it. I'm not sure I did. It was just maybe a little bit too out there for me, but very interesting. Obviously this is in translation as well. Yes, I don't know. Yeah, an interesting one. If you've read this, let me know what you think, because I still don't know. I still don't know. It's been a month, but I still don't know. Okay, so the next book I have is The Magic Toy Shop by Angela Carter. This, again, is not what I expected. There is no magic in it. And I read it for a fantasy and science fiction. Stop playing with the lights. You're grabbing it. Grabbing it. Yeah, again, very strange, but I think it's kind of very much what you expect for Angela Carter. This is the first book I've read of hers. I do have some fairy tales of hers that I was meaning to read, but I've never read them. Oh, what is he doing? Leo! Leo, baby! Baby! So yeah, there were bits I liked about it. I actually found it quite easy to read and get through. There were bits I didn't quite like the ending. Like the ending just like ended and I'm just like, what? Like I wanted so much more. There were so many unanswered questions in this, especially the hand bit, if you know what I'm talking about. The hand bit, why, I don't really know why that was in there. We discussed it a little bit in my seminar. It's from like an intertextual reference to another fairy tale, but it just seemed a little bit random. Like I wanted an actual answer. I just wanted more solid answers from the ending of this, I think, because it just ended and I was like, what are you doing? Gremlin, yes, I know. You're being naughty. So yeah, I still don't know. I think I gave it a 3.5 stars because I did enjoy it and there were elements to it I did like, but I'm not sure again. This is really bad wrap up because I don't even know what my thoughts are on most of these books so far. But there we go. So the next book that I have is Peter Pan by J.M Barrie. I actually really enjoyed this. I read it quite quickly. I enjoyed it much more than I was expecting to. It's got some weird things in there. Like I didn't kind of expect so many of the kind of sexual references that are in there. You know, being a kid's book and a kid's book. I didn't read as a kid, but I was like brought up on the film and everything, like the live action film or like the one with the actual people in it. Not the cartoon, I don't really remember the cartoon. But yeah, like Tinkerbell is kind of sexualized quite a lot in this, and the furry is kind of like, there's like a mention of an orgy. I was going to check up if the OED, if the definition had changed of that. But there is another point where Wendy pretty much calls her a slut. And, you know, in like the olden time speak. What are you doing? I lost my train of thought. So yes, bit of weird, bit of a thing there. I was gonna do my essay on it, but I've changed my mind now. I'm gonna do it on witches instead. So yes, I think it's very interesting and I would recommend it. It is pretty typical, like the actual storyline is very much similar to how I remember it being in the film. The ending is slightly different, ever so slightly, just like the film just kind of cuts it just before the last like kind of chapter where it talks about the continuation of how the story of Peter Pan continues through the family, Wendy's family and her children, and it kind of recurs. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Okay. So the next two books are both by H.G. Wells. I both listened to these on audiobooks because I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a huge fan of this kind of thing. Last month, you'll know that or a few months ago now, maybe, I read The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, and I wasn't the hugest fan, and I wasn't the hugest fan of these. They did get better, I think, but I did listen to an audiobook, and I'm not gonna lie, I didn't listen to them like with 100% attention. I kind of played Animal Crossing whilst doing that and kind of lost my train of thoughts a couple of times, but I did listen to enough of the audiobook to get through my seminars, which is the point of that, because yes. So The War of the Worlds follows this man who lives on Earth, and he's a journalist and he has a friend who is a scientist, and then this asteroid kind of lands on Earth and it turns out they're Martians, and then the Martians take over the world, and there's loads of like red spoily stuff, which is the front cover. And he kind of has to go through, like, he's like, it's basically kind of apocalyptic, and he has to try and live or like get to, he's like separated from his wife, and I think he's trying to get back to his wife, but he travels all through England trying to find her. And then Spoiler alert, not spoiler alert, I won't tell you, but the ending is a little bit anticlimactic. It's not what you expect. It kind of just happens. So yeah, listen to the audiobook. I'm not a fan of H.G. Wells, I don't think. And then the second one was The Island of Dr. Morio, and again, this is about a guy who's on a boat, and he meets this guy, and something happens on the boat, and he's about to get like chucked off it, but instead this guy says, oh, I'll take you to my island. And he meets Dr. Demorio, who is doing all these experiments on animals, who's trying to make them more like people, trying to humanize them, and he's successful in a lot of ways, but he was kind of banished from London for his experiments because they're a bit dodgy. And it's kind of just the unfolding in that. So it's a lot of kind of just, well, this So More is like a discussion on kind of like morality and humanization and that kind of sciencey side. But yeah, it's not really my favorite kind of thing. I'm not really sure what to say. Yes. They're meant to be like science fiction classics though, so nice to have them checked off. And then the final book, and the only book that I read for pleasure, which I also actually read almost in its entirety in my last reading vlog, which was my last video, so I shall link that for you guys. And that is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, and I absolutely loved it. I think this is perhaps slightly underestimated as a Brandon Sanderson book. Like, it's never recommended, I don't think, to read from his. Like, it's always it's almost like the Mistborn trilogy, etc., or like his massive big one. Leo, always being a gremlin. Ho ho ho. Harry's not gonna like that. He's playing in his computer. But as you can see, like, he gramified this book and chewed the edge, which was lovely. But I absolutely love this, absolutely marathoned it. It's like 650 pages, and I read it in like 4 or 5 days. So for me, that's pretty quick at the moment, especially since I'm juggling reading all these other books. But I loved it. So for those, everyone always describes this as the magic system is about colour. However, it is so much more than that. This magic system is about religion, and they're kind of like, it's weird. So the gods in this world are real. Like, they live in this palace where people, the priests, look after them and serve them, and the gods listen to people and they can grant them their wishes. However, they do die if they do that. So the gods aren't, they're immortal, but they can die, and they kind of tend to die, or like, such a noisy person. So they kind of don't seem to last more than 10 years before they're going to give up and move on. And the way they do that is by breath. So I think the magic system is more about breath, which is kind of like physical, as in like you give people breath and you take breath, and each person is born with a single breath, but they can accumulate breaths over time. And obviously it's very complicated, and then you can use your breath to animate objects. It's easiest if the object is more human-like, so like a statue or like a piece of cloth that you've cut into a little human figure or something like that. And to do that, you also need to take colour from the world. I'm not gonna lie, I don't 100% understand how all these different aspects work together. I think you could have gotten rid of the colour aspect of it and just used the breath, and it would have been fine. The colour just kind of seemed like a second thought to me, but it was still pretty cool. And there obviously is different sides to this, and multiple different levels and complexities to the magic system, because it's Brandon Sanderson and he has always many different sides and complexities to his magic systems. But it was incredible. So I think this was best for me of all the Brandon Sandersons I've read so far, because it was very fast paced, which is good if you're trying to read a book quickly. Brandon Sanderson likes to take his time and build up his stories over a long period of time, especially in his series. Well, I've only read Mistborn, but from what I've heard of his other series, he takes a very long time to do his groundbreaking and like build his story and his world. Whereas in this, he couldn't do that because it is a standalone. I think there is going to be a second book, but not for a very long time, and I don't think it was planned to be. But he had to jam-pack all his story building and all his plot, which was just as jam-packed as normal, but in a much smaller space than a 3-book trilogy, for example. So I thought it was pretty fantastic, and I love the characters in it. There was a twist in the middle. See the vlog for my reaction, but there was a twist in the middle, and it was just I did not see that coming, so it was very good. Let me know in the comments if you read this too and if you think this is as good as I do, because I'd be interested to know. So yes, that's all the books. That's all the books that I read this year. This month, which is quite a lot. Most of them are obviously uni books, so that's, you know, not as exciting perhaps. But you know, I think as far as uni books go, these are quite good. Like, you know, we've got Korean literature, children's literature, fantasy literature that's not really fantasy literature. We've got an array. So yes, these are all the books that I read. Let me know what you read last month and what your favourite book was and if you'd recommend any of them. I always love a good recommendation. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you think, and if you've read any of like the children's classics and you remember them from childhood. I wonder if rereading them as adulthood you'd see them slightly differently, or if you can imagine studying them as like a literature class. That would be quite cool. Well, yeah, did that make sense? I don't know. So yes, thank you again for watching, and I shall see you. Oh, if you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see any more, and I shall see you in the next video.